I mean, it's an emotional day for people who have memories and family involved in this. It's 70 years since my grandfather died in one of the camps, and I marked that about 10 days ago. And I mean, it's really hard, this, because I was talking to my mum about this. I mean, it's not the kind of thing you talk about very much when you're growing up in a household affected by these things, but it sort of it marks you, and it's so important that we remember. I think the theme of Holocaust Memorial Day this year is keep the memory alive. And as you say, Nikki, when there's prejudice around the world, when we see the rise of anti-Semitism, it's incredibly important that we keep that memory alive. And I'll be at the ceremony today at which David Cameron and the Prince of Wales are speaking.
How did you mark it 10 days ago?
It's a Jewish thing. You light a candle. And actually, I know this sounds almost unbelievable, but it's only actually 6 months ago that we discovered the full circumstances of what happened to my grandfather.
So where was he?
He was in Germany he ended up in Germany in a labor camp, which is where he eventually died, according to the records. I went to Yad Vashem, which is the place in Israel where they have records on the Holocaust, and that's where we discovered more information about what had happened to him. And we lit a candle, and
was that a very? I don't believe you're an incredibly religious man, but was that in a sense a very spiritual experience?
Well, it's a sort of it's a kind of way of remember. It's a Jewish thing to remember, and I talked about it with a friend of mine and we sort of agreed that was the right thing to do. And I lit the candle, and my eldest son Daniel said to me, "What's that for?" And it's hard to. He's 5, so it's hard to explain. But I explained it was for my grandfather, who I didn't meet, and who died at a very young age. But it's
what is it like having somebody in your own family that died? So a lot of us cannot relate to that. I mean, our very own Adrian Goldberg is over there. He does have that experience. But what does it feel like to know that your own flesh and blood was part of the slaughtered?
It's awful, and it makes me feel incredibly lucky. And there's horror and there's hope, because it's also the case that many members of my family were saved because they were Jews who were hidden by decent people who, there's one story, which is that there's 17 members of my family who are sheltered in a Belgian village that's on my father's side, and it was only because of the decent people in that village who helped them. So I think this year and at all times, it's right to remember the horror, but it's also right to remember the hope and sense of optimism of what decent people did to save Jews.
As we were saying earlier on, it was human beings who saved Jews. It was human beings who perpetrated the atrocities. It's something in humanity. But you mentioned the rise of anti-Semitism. Have you ever experienced anti-Semitism?
I think people sort of make abusive remarks on Twitter and all that. The only time I actually experienced it, funnily enough, I did go back to Poland once with my mum, and we went to look at a house that she had been sheltered in, and somebody was there at the gate and made some remark about the Jews. And so that's a sort of direct, that's the kind of my memory of a direct memory of it. I've got to say to you, and this is important also to say, we should always be vigilant about anti-Semitism, and there is evidence that there is a bit of a rise of anti-Semitism in this country. But I think we should also remember that the vast majority of people right across our country are, incredibly decent people who would be as appalled by anti-Semitism as Jews in Britain are too. And I think it's really important to remember that as we also are vigilant about the anti-Semitism wherever we find it.